Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 55 for January 2016. That's right, 2016, a shiny new year without all the dirty smudges from last year, hopefully. I am your co-host number one, Quinn, and with me as always, co-host number two, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Oh, I'm doing all right, Quinn. I think this is the first time I've been sober this year. How about you?
Yeah, I'm working on some sobriety this year as well. So yeah, it's not in the formal sense, but
sure.
Yeah, I'm recovering from the holidays. And did you get any retro computing done over the break?
I did. I picked up a Pi 2B, the Raspberry Pi 2B, and loaded that with Ivan's A2 server, and so I have a little Apple II server that I can download disk images from and stuff like that. So that's a lot of fun. I've been playing around with that, and
nice.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And I'm trying to think. There was something. Oh, and I got my parents got me one of those quote retro Pac-Man LED clocks. It's kind of fun. So,
very cool.
What about you?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I did get some stuff done. So the big thing for me was I committed this time because I was going to be home in Canada, which is not a common occurrence. So I committed this time. I'm going to do some stuff that has to get done. So I brought a much larger suitcase than I would normally bring and left it 2/3 empty. And I then as soon as my mom wasn't looking, I snuck down to the basement and started digging through boxes. And not that she would mind, of course. She would love it if I would get rid of all my crap from her basement. Yeah. But I dug way down in the bottom, and I found the box with my 2GS in it. And I did not have enough room to bring it home, unfortunately.
Oh,
but
no.
But I did crack it open and cut the battery off. So
Well, that's something.
Yes, one more GS saved, and luckily there was no leakage. Actually, it looked brand new under there, so now I know it will stay that way.
Did you find Charles's 2GS and Randy's 2GS and Carrington's 2GS down there as well?
Yeah, I made a little fort at one point of 2GSs, so it was good. I had some fun.
Is your mom's hoarding those things?
Yes, that's right. For anyone who doesn't get that joke, last episode of Open Apple, we learned that my mom is apparently hoarding everyone's 2GSs. She's cornering the 2GS market for some strange reason.
Right.
Let's see. I guess she figures it drew my attention for so many years, and there must be something to these things. Let's see. And then the other big mission I accomplished was I rescued all of my 5 1/4-inch floppies. I think all of them, because
Nice.
I actually have a collection of Apple II floppies, and apologies in advance, I have a collection of Commodore 64 floppies.
Boo, Quinn. Boo.
And yeah, those I just kind of rolled around in and got them all dirty and just used them to line the waste bin. I'm pretty sure that's all the Commodore ones, but I think I got all the Apple II ones, more importantly. And it was a heroic effort, but I managed to get all of them into my luggage, including one of the carrying cases and my external Laser 128 floppy drive, which of course I needed to read them because weirdly I have an Apple II at home and no way to read 5 1/4-inch floppy disks. So having only an Apple IIc Plus at the moment and no external drive, I had no way to read them. So I needed to bring that home too. And I managed to do that, and so I've started going through them a little bit. It's been great fun. And I wrote a blog post about that. I go through and clean up the floppy drive and tune it up a little bit and start playing with some old disks. So there's some real gems in there, which I'm looking forward to blogging about. So
cool.
That was my little success story for the holidays.
All right. I guess that kind of wraps up for me for what's been happening since the last episode. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we've spent enough time pretending we like each other,
right.
So let's roll into our interview here. So with us this month is Henry Courbis of UltimateMicro. Say hello, Henry.
Hello, Henry. Thanks, and let me say thanks for the honor of being able to share this time with both of you, and thanks to everybody for listening. And let me first apologize for a recent cold, my occasional, hopefully very occasional coughing. But no excuse for my monotone speaking or lack of eloquence. But nonetheless, thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm sure your audio quality can only improve this show, so not to worry.
Uh-oh.
If I hear you cough once, I'm kicking you off the show, Henry.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think we've been a bit remiss by not having you on the show yet. UltimateMicro has been very active lately, and both with developing products and
Perhaps even
with,
reactive.
yes,
Very active.
Bump. That joke will make sense in a minute. And you've also been active in the community, publishing open source designs and documentation and so on. So maybe get us started here by telling us a little bit of the history of UltimateMicro.
Well, UltimateMicro more or less started as Reactive Micro, which kind of started as Reactive Corporation, Reactive Computers, and basically went through a few incarnations over the years, different businesses, and ultimately, Auntie and I, the last year and a half, I would say, kind of been going full force. Me a little more. Anthony still got a square job. I'm doing this thing full time and kind of seeing it where it takes
Really?
me. Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive, considering
that's
you're
bold.
basically you're relying on the pockets of a retro hobbyist community. That's great that you're able to do that.
Well, again, it's an experiment, kind of see where it goes. I've always liked to kind of see and try new endeavors and learn new things.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's so crazy. I mean, there is a sizable and growing Apple II fan base. There's more people on Apple II Enthusiasts, the Facebook group, all the time, and Kansas Fest attendance has been rising dramatically, and Apple people have a lot of money, as we all know. So you never know.
I think you're right. I know last couple times I got a chance to speak with Vince Briel at K-Fest. He said the same thing, that everything seems to be growing. He's doing it full time as well, I believe, with the Apple Kit. I think he's also doing some other side projects as well, besides the Apple and the hobby stuff. But he said he's making enough basically to feed himself, which in any hobby market is amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really great. Let's go back a little bit further for a minute. Your personal history with the Apple II. When was the first time you got to play with one, and why did you choose that instead of Atari or Commodore?
Well, back through the mists of time, little Henry was definitely into computer games. The Atari 2600, I think my parents were a little late, but I want to say they got one like 1981. And I was always into the arcade games, but having a home unit, something I didn't have to get on my bike and ride many miles to the 7-Eleven that had a little room with 4 or 5 games in it, or to the Malibu up the road that was 10 miles by bike was a nightmare as an 8-year-old. And then trying to feed quarters into the machine, because a quarter was a lot of money to a kid back then. So basically got in touch with Apple IIs in school. I want to say it was 84. And in 3rd grade, they rolled in a couple Apples, and they even had a 2C, if I remember correctly, and Franklin's. And it was like, wow, you could put a disc in. I was used to cartridges. And you could put a disc in, and it's got a keyboard. You could type on this. Like, there's programming languages. And the teacher was a little bit versed in programming, and we could do 10 print hello run kind of thing. And little GR graphics. We gave us a little graph paper, and we draw little graphics. So quite an early age, I guess, compared to some people born in the 70s. Got a little taste of it in school. And it wasn't until the summer of 85, I believe, where my father and I were looking for something to do one weekend. And I said, let's go fix your motorcycle. We haven't been on the bike in a while. And I'm probably 11. And he's like, well, what if we got a computer? And I'm just like looking at him with puppy dog eyes, like, really? Like, my whole world just shattered. Well, what do you mean we're going to get a computer? Like, this is Christmas in July. Come on. And we did. We went to the local computer place, and it was the most money I've ever seen my parents spend on anything. I want to say it was like $3,500 or $3,600. And he signed a little receipt, and off we went with a 2E and a green screen and a image writer and 1 or 2 little software programs. I think Choplifter and a typing program, a copy and paste or something. And went home, set it up, and it kind of been addicted ever since. And of course, the problem was I quickly ran into, unlike the 2600, not everybody had an Apple. So where do you get warez? So that occasionally my aunt who, yeah, what's that?
What's that?
So you could save up all your money, which I found out to be very tedious. And as a kid, we always worked. We were shoveling snow. I was relatively entrepreneurial. There was a golf course nearby. We'd always walk around, walk with the dog, find golf balls. I would get sodas at the local Acme and sell sodas and golf balls on the golf course on the weekends and try and make some kind of money, because games were like $40 and up, and a joystick was like $45 and up. So you needed all these things for your Apple. So unfortunately, it kind of pushed me to be a little more entrepreneurial than I would have liked to have been, I guess at 11 or 12. And then in 1987, a friend of mine in school gave me a 300 BPS Telephonics manual everything modem. And it was a nightmare trying to connect. Again, 1987. Most bulletin boards were 12 to 2400. There were a few that were 300. And this is, I'm 14 at the time or so, and we're in middle school, great, and we're talking back and forth, and somebody mentioned phreaking, and it's like, well, what's this? So found a system. It was a local RCA system. Hopefully the statute of limitations are up on this. Local RCA system run by something with Martin Marietta, I want to say. And basically you could call in at 300 baud, and you could dial out to other systems. And usually you would connect at the same speed, otherwise you would get all kinds of errors. But you could call at 1200. So I could actually call some BBSs at 1200, which was like the minimum requirement to even get on some of the boards, the cool ones that you wanted to. And then I would tell my friend, look, when you get a chance, download these games. I found this at this board. I found this at this board. And give me a copy when you get a chance. So we had this kind of half network, half sneaker net kind of system set up. And he got tired of that real quick. But I got a few more games that way. So I was more than addicted at that point. And then my parents had divorced a few years before, and in 1988, I think my dad's revenge on my mom was to give me a Prometheus 2400 baud modem. And that phone bill, yeah, that phone bill got very expensive,
back then.
Unbeknownst to me, and my mom definitely had issues when I figured everything in my area code would be free. No, that's not how it worked back then. So then we ended up getting scopes, if you remember those on the phones. I could call certain boards, but that was only good for like 20 hours. After that, it was just anything I could do to get 800 PBXs to kind of freak off of or trade stuff. So I had a bit of a nefarious career here in Apple II as far as to feed my warez habits. I didn't do a whole lot of hacking or cracking necessarily, but there was a little bit here and there. But it was mostly just, what could I do to get the next game?
I think that life story pretty much is a good analogy for every single listener of this show, probably. I think that's surprisingly similar to my own story.
Now, how did you as a phone freaker and warez downloader get into the hardware side of things? Because that seems to be, it's easy to sit down with a book on 6502 assembly or basic and kind of start tapping away, but it seems like it's a bigger jump or maybe an investment or whatever to actually produce hardware, which is what you're doing with UltimateMicro.
Well, absolutely. I think Dan Pote, who owned AE, said that if he could do it all over again, that he would definitely have gone the software route. However, I've never been much of a programmer. Those chips with the magic smoke in them, they still kind of confound me. I'm really just a hack. So programming was just, and you needed the books, and you needed time, and to make a game is hours and hours of time. I'm a dummy. I'm not going to sit there and spend weekends when I could be playing Choplifter. Why am I going to do that? So the one thing that did kind of push me a little into hardware early on was I got my 1200 or 2400 baud modem, and I'm calling around, and the 2E had the old character set. Unbeknownst to me, my 2E had weird issues occasionally with some games. I could never figure out why. And today I can look back and say, oh, it was unenhanced. I had no idea what the difference was. But with the unenhanced character set, I did have mouse text, which I found very odd. I think the place that we took it back to get it enhanced didn't do it correctly. But I had mouse text. But the F and the G characters weren't right. So anytime I logged onto a bulletin board that used mouse text like metal, and there was ACOS, I'm trying to remember GBBS, a couple of them guys with mods use mouse text for the menus, which was amazing back then. I couldn't believe you went from ASCII now to menu systems. It was amazing. And the mouse text wasn't correct on the 2E. It was different on the GS and different on the 2C. So I found a friend who kind of had an idea how to fix this, and he helped me a little bit. He actually wrote a little program where I could display the characters, and I went in and created ultimately what became reactive text, which is in the download section at UltimateMicro. If you want to burn your own ROM and see what I did, I changed a cursor to be a blinking apple. I changed the fonts to kind of match my 286 at the time. I was transitioning a little bit. This is like 1990, I want to say. I was transitioning to the PC a little bit when I had interned at a place. And I ended up fixing my little modem issue with the mouse text. So I was kind of like, wow, this is really neat. And I actually understood what I did, which was the first in computers. Even with programming, it was just kind of like you hit 10 print. I didn't know why it did it. It just did it. But now I could actually see with the EEPROM, I burned it at work. I could change the different code and change the text on the screen. Like, wow, this is kind of neat. And that always kind of stuck with me. And I wanted to sell it. And of course, Apple with Franklin with the lawsuit wouldn't let anybody sell any Apple firmware. So I couldn't sell this little upgrade ROM. So I boo on Apple. And at the time, this was about 91, I was interning at high school. I was never very good at school and just doing very poorly. And the counselor kind of said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know, like playing computers. He's like, well, that's not going to be very possible, but maybe I can get you a job at a computer company, like sweeping the floor. And I'm like, sold, because I'll somehow work magic and talk my way up into the tech room, I guess. I don't know. I'm 16. I'm a dumb kid. I don't know any better. And he went around a bunch of the Apple places trying to find me a job, and none of them would give me a job. I was very surprised. Even offering to work for free. And one place we bought the Apple from years later, I went back and was like, really? You don't want to give me a job working for free? Like, I bought an Apple from you. At least you could just let me clean your floor and take out the trash. So he ended up finding a job for me at a PC repair place. And I've kind of been a Windows PC guy ever since. I kind of gave Apple the middle finger. I kind of threw the Apple in the closet for a while, and just the games were amazing. There was soundboards and all this kind of stuff, and I was not really getting any money, but I had a little bit from other entrepreneurial things at the time, like shoveling snow and mowing grass. So I had a few bucks here and there, and I ended up just salvaging a 286, kind of going that route, and I ended up giving away my 2E, which I regret to this day. I ended up giving it to a friend of mine who gave it to his friend, and it kind of got lost in the annals of history, unfortunately. And I started my own business, and that's kind of where we ended up here.
So what brought you back to the Apple II then?
Well, running my business up until about 2001, I was doing a few different things. Kind of started early on writing accounting software with a buddy of mine who actually gave me the modem. And then we ended up selling that to a bunch of little places. It was kind of Quicken before there was Quicken, basically. And I was surprised I kind of understood accounting, having no formal training in math, failing out of school basically, and just kind of understood once this guy's wife ran a paper mill, and the guy's wife did all the books for these different companies, and she explained all the accounting stuff, and he and I went, wow, I kind of get this, and I was helping him lay it out, and we made a few bucks. I was really surprised, and that kind of got me going in business, and we flipped that money. We ended up getting in the payphones for a little while. I started going the IT route. He and I ended up splitting up. He just was the kind of guy that took a check and wouldn't return phone calls, and I was getting tired of lawsuits coming in. So I was like, see you later. He's still in federal prison right now, I believe. But yeah, wow. He did some bad stuff.
Wow.
But you can Google that and check those stories out. But anyway, so I continued on with the IT route and got into different things over the years besides IT. Business consulting. I like the idea. You can work for your own business, but you can do more working on your business. So I set up little networks where I would hook up 8 or 10 different little IT companies, and we would do mass advertising, and we could kind of broker work back and forth. So I could go, hey, I've got a job for you up in Paramus, and I'm in South Jersey, and if I sell you this job, give me like 10% on it. So we'd end up making money back and forth just finding jobs from marketing and stuff. And it was pretty good up until the tech crash, the whole economy and everything, the IT bubble back in 2001 with 9/11. And I don't think the economy, a lot of economists even say we haven't recovered from it yet, really. And I kind of see that here and there. We've had the housing bubble as well, so we're still kind of in the doldrums. But in 2001, I'd spent a lot of money in advertising in a few different businesses, not just my IT business, but in the IT business in particular. I spent like $30,000 in advertising for 3 months, and I couldn't get the phone to ring once. Nobody was buying hardware. Nobody was upgrading their networks. Windows had nothing new out. There was no driving force in the industry. Novell was starting to kind of be toppled at that point. It was just an odd time. So I've always been very dynamic. Nothing is static. I'll try something new. It's always kind of been what I do, who I am kind of thing. I'm a maverick kind of like that. So I was like, let's try business consulting, which I'd done a little bit in the past. So I would come in with different companies and seeing a lot of small companies. One thing, running your own company and dealing in services, you deal a lot in a lot of other companies, accounting and software and networks. You kind of see the inner workings of their business. So I came in and started business consulting. Hey, I can show you how to make more money here, how to switch over your phone service, how to get better electric rates, and give me a piece of this. And ultimately, I would come in as an employee or a hiree or consultant, whatever they wanted to call me. And ultimately, when I'd left, they fired me. That was my goal, to fire myself, essentially. But I'd set up, some companies even new management for them and just find the right guys. A lot of guys know their core, know how to run a business, potentially, know their product usually, but they lack all the other details. And that's kind of where I was able to fill them in a little bit. Just having the experience over the years. I did closed circuit TV was another thing during this time of 2001 to kind of 2005-ish. Got into CCTV trying to program the recording units to do certain things, to prompt messages for maintenance, to show my logo, things that few people even do today. These are just marketing things. These are basic core concepts of business that I don't know, people just don't do or haven't thought of. It's odd. Got into flipping homes. I've always been very good with my hands. I probably would have been a diesel mechanic or something like that had it not been for transistors and computers, but I liked air conditioning and sitting at a desk, or under a desk maybe I should say, fixing stuff. So it just kind of worked. And then late 2005, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm kind of hustling here and there. And I had a dream, I remember, about a RAM factor board. And it struck me as really odd, and it stuck with me for a few days. Yeah, I had a RAM factor. My buddy who gave me the modem gave me his RAM factor board for a little while. And having something solid state to download to, unlike a floppy disk, was really cool and fast. And it was 768K. We couldn't afford a full meg. It was huge. So I could download 5 warez at a time. I could do some serious leeching back in the day. And I had a dream about the board, and I always remembered wondering like how RAM chips worked, and this just stuck with me for a while. And after a couple months, it didn't die, it didn't go away. I kept thinking about it. And I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about electronics. I took electronics course in high school, but I got it. Again, it's like programming. I'm not very good with kind of thinking about it. I have to physically see it. I have to do it in order to learn it. So I kind of got into electronics a little bit, trying to get an old Apple. I can actually understand, I think, from the EEPROM days what was going on. So let me get an old Apple. So I got some old 2Es, and I think I got a GS on eBay. And this stuff was still pretty cheap back then. And I really have to give a big shout out to Washington Apple Pie down in Maryland. Somebody posted in one of the news groups not too long after I kind of got back into things that they were giving away a lot of stuff, just cleaning out their closets. And I went down and had a really nice guy by the name of Lauren who kind of pointed me to some of the finer points of stuff. And I think I mentioned K-Fest, and I got a truckload of stuff, some of it was really rare stuff. I had no idea. I was still kind of getting into it. I wanted to pull these things apart. I didn't want to play with transwarps. I wanted to pull these things apart and learn how the magic smoke does what it does. And ultimately, that's more or less how I got started, and kind of went into, after that, soundboard a little bit, trying to study the Mockingboard, to Transwarp ultimately, trying to study how that works. And I'm just a schmuck in a basement. I'm a hack. I have no formal training, really, beyond, like, I can tell you how a transistor works on the atomic level. I can't tell you what happens when you get 10 of them together and why a calculator works, but that's kind of what I'm hoping to learn.
Now, at what point did you hook up with Anthony? Anthony being Anthony Martino, the ultimate in UltimateMicro.com.
Yes, Anthony. Well, I've always been big in collaboration and open source. One of the things I found kind of studying the Apple IIe early on was programmable logic. I understood like how an LSO4 worked, and okay, it's this little piece of silicon, it's got these couple transistors on it, this makes this NOT gate, and here we go. Okay, I can understand that. Now, what about programmable logic? You're telling me I can write a code to it? Well, maybe it's similar to an EEPROM, and the Apple IIe just happened to have one in it, so I was like, perfect. I can write code, I can test stuff, and ultimately maybe change it, make it do something I want it to do. That's kind of cool. Like just a chip you buy off the shelf. So I've always kind of been into open source and studying the PALs and collaboration mainly, and kind of led me down the path where I met Bill Garber, who helped with the Mockingbird and the dual character generator, and selling stuff. And I'm starting to get a little more into the hobby, and I need more equipment and stuff. But I've kind of abandoned my old jobs at this point. Like I also need some income. Maybe I'll try and sell a few of these things. And through him, I met Joachim Lang with the microdrive, started selling those. So it actually made a few bucks. I was surprised I could kind of sit on my butt, tinker all day and learn, and collaborate with a few people and make some money too. Like this is weird. I didn't think the world worked this way, but okay, this is cool. I'm getting into this. So Bill was kind of the first guy, and then Anthony Martino of UltimateApple2.com came around. I want to say Bill was like 2006, and Anthony was like 2007. And he called me about a microdrive, and he had some questions about his GS, and he had an old AE, what was the board that ran DOS? Transporter. He had an old AE transporter and had questions. Where can I get this? Where can I get that? I was kind of prevalent in news groups back then, so I actually had in on some of the stuff. I could tell them, go here, look here, these guys are selling it, that kind of thing. And in 2007, we put together the 3.5 drive controller. It was just on my list of things to do. He said, yeah, let's get a few of these boards and we'll figure out how this thing works and possibly roll it into something else and sell it. And I was like, cool. So it kind of went from buying a power supply and a microdrive into funding projects. So my kind of buddy. Yeah. Yeah. And then part of the collaboration as well, remember Ferdinand Mayer Herman. We met him in 2008. He came to K-Fest 2009 of VGA fame. He's the one that created I want to say one of the first, if not the first, Apple II VGA solutions for the 2E and 2C. And at that point, Anthony and I released the 3.5 drive controller. I still did my thing. Anthony kind of did his thing still. We collaborated with Jeff Weiss with the Mega Memory Tester. We had basically commissioned him and said, look, we're planning on making some memory cards at some point. We need a way to test them. Like, I need to know. I'm still learning what I don't know about what I don't know, and this would help. He said, cool. So he wrote Mega Memory Tester, basically. Tom Arnold of philosophyofsound.com. He's helped with the Mockingbird V1A, basically. Dagan Brock, who's of Dagan Brock fame. Flappy Bird, Mini Memory Tester, specifically, and hopefully 64K cache board. He's Dagan, yeah, we all kind of.
He's Dagan.
So I like collaborating with these guys. That's kind of how Anthony and I got together. Other guys, Jeff Body, he's helped with the Transwarp GS schematic. I just happened to, as I started to come back kind of full force, he came up. I met him online and said, yeah, I'm working on a Transwarp schematic. It's like, ooh, I can help you there. Hold on. So we're collaborating with him. Gabriel Gorla of GG Labs. If you do a search on eBay out there in internet land, he's got a lot of neat projects. It's for sale. Go check that out. Support him. Koichi Nishida, if I'm sure I'm screwing that up, of Nishida Radio Chapter 3.
Nishida Radio, yep.
Yeah, if you do a search for Nishida Radio Chapter 3 out there, you'll see his website. I'm not even going to try. It's 100 characters long. He needs to work on his website. I've yelled at him a few times, but collaborated back and forth with him a little bit as far as, hey, we got new projects coming out. Be forewarned. Don't go nuts. Hey, here's some ideas. Can you help us here kind of thing. Playman as well in Bulgaria. Sorry, buddy, I can't pronounce your last name. I'm not even going to try. But
No one can.
No one can, I know. It's got weird R's and everything. So Apple2haven.com. Support him as well. He's a great guy. He and I have been back and forth a few times over Facebook and email of, hey, I've got this idea, try this. Hey, by the way, I've got this coming out. Be forewarned. So there's no reason to compete, basically, that I can see in such a small community. So I've always at least tried to keep in touch with these guys and let them know, hey, we've got a memory card coming out. Hey, we've got a Transwarp coming out. Hey, I don't know what you have in the pipeline, but be forewarned. Here's what's coming out. If you're dumping $1 million into it, don't, be forewarned, please. Lately, Nate Hartwell, who's helped in the past with the GS Rex Plus project, which was kind of the first incarnation of the memory board. And he had some ideas, I had some ideas, and ultimately became the 8 meg RAM card. And hopefully he's working on the GS ROM option. If you're listening out there, Nate, I'm going to be pestering you in the next coming weeks here. What's going on with that? John Morris, he's helping us with the power supply project. Ultimately, we'd like to have a user replaceable unit where you could just open up your power supply, cut a few lines, take your screwdriver, unscrew the board, screw new stuff down, put it back together, you're done. There needs to be something out there. Things are just dying like crazy. John can't resolder everybody's caps on his power supply. He's going to lose his fingers eventually working so hard. So John's been quite the trooper out there, and he's done some great work. If you need some power supplies or rebuild, definitely find him in news groups or contact me with email and I'll point you in the right direction. But hopefully we'll have a power supply in the near future here. Yeah, Xander Mass, we've collaborated with him. He's hopefully helping with the programmable breadboard. He wanted to learn about EEPROMs and Flash and how to rewrite things. And he found a circuit on the CFFA and said, ooh, this is neat. I'd like to learn how to write to EEPROMs using this circuit. So he played around with it and he's going to lend us his circuit. And basically we'll put out kind of a continuation of the 8-bit system Little Proto 2 that'll have an options for programmable logic. Could be a couple small gals, could be a CPLD. It's going to be a little option that you'll kind of push onto the board. You can program it any way you want. It'll have built-in flash, probably 64K or 128K of flash. You can write to anything you want. Just run this little program and boom, off it goes. We'll probably do a menu system for it. So you could easily put your program in ROM and run it. And hopefully that'll spur on some more tinkering in the community. If a programmer, maybe Dagan, could write his little program and they go, hey, I could make it blink LEDs. And then maybe that'll start him into the evil world of hardware, convert him to the dark side. And guys like Britt Dodd, with the 2E kit, we're hoping to have something there. Preferably for this K-Fest, I don't think it's going to happen, but kind of like what they did with the Apple I kits, basically, but in a 2E form. Maybe it goes inside your case, maybe it doesn't. We're still kind of fleshing this out a little bit. It's still in its infancy, unfortunately, so I don't think anything's really going to happen this year that way. But ultimately, I like to collaborate. I like to keep things open source, and that's how Auntie and I met, to kind of get back to the original question.
So you touched on the Transwarp there. That's certainly probably the most the recent product that you guys are most famous for cloning that. That was, long thought in the community to be sort of unclonable. So can you talk a little bit about the development of that? And you guys sort of jumped into the deep end there, taking on one of the most difficult things to clone. How did that go?
Well, contrary to popular belief, probably one of the most boring, easiest things I've ever worked on. I mean, just when I found, to go back a little bit, back in 2005, I found a programmer online that claimed, an actual IC programmer, not a person, a piece of hardware that claimed by this Chinese company. So the translation to English was very bad at best. It claimed to be able to read protected gals. And I said, no way, because I've been trying to study how gals work. I'm going to buy one of these. It's a few $100. I could invest that into my education. So I bought one, and sure enough, it's able to read some copy protected gals. And usually with the gal, programmable logic device, it's a gate array logic, GAL. You can write a little code. You can tell it how to do stuff with the inputs and how to do stuff with the outputs, and essentially program them any way you want. And it can save you a lot of real estate, a lot of chips, a lot of cost on your PCB and on your design. And it's also copy protectable, so you can really protect your design If I just make a computer and it's all regular chips, anybody can copy it. But when Apple put their little PAL in there, it kind of made it a little harder for somebody to copy. You could figure out what it does, but you're going to stop about 80% of people right there, just done. I don't know if they did that specifically. They had other custom chips in the 2E, but that was one thing that kind of stopped them. Same with the 2C, had some of these custom chips in it as well, programmable chips in it as well. So when I copied or broke basically the gals on the Transwarp, again being an open source kind of guy, I put them out in the public saying, hey, this can be useful. I'm starting to get higher speeds on some of these boards. Wow, I'm not really into this, but somebody else take it and run with it. And to my amazement, nobody really did. I mean, when I got into Apple, I kind of looked at Commodore and said, wow, I'm a very small fish in a big pond here. We got some big names out here that are tinkering, creating C1s and things. And like, wow, I'm not going to be able to compete with this. Forget that. And I looked at Altair, and I met a guy out there who's cloning the Altair. I said, okay, this is kind of done. And I went in another direction, looked at like Amigas, and went, wow, these guys know what the heck they're doing in Amigas too. Jeez. I looked at Apple and went, there's really not much going on in Apple. I think I'm going to get involved here. If I ever did a business, it would be interesting to be, I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond, obviously. So when I released the gals, it was a little bit of testing water, a little bit of, hey, look at me kind of thing. But I assumed somebody would do something with it, and nobody really did for years. I mean, this is 2006 that they've been released, and nobody's done anything with it since. So when Anthony and I kind of came back off of our hiatus, we looked and said, hey, somebody in the news group was selling stuff and ended up being kind of a shyster and taking money and not returning phone calls, which I've dealt with that in the past. And he's like, can we do this? I'm like, yeah, although this is really boring. Like, anybody can clone the Transwarp. I did the hard part. The code's out there. That's the only thing that really would have stopped somebody from cloning it. You got these protected gals. You can get them copied in places like China, but they're hundreds of dollars each. So maybe it would have been $1,000. But you would have gotten the code back eventually. But cloning the board, really, we did nothing. All I did was pull chips off a board, so it was a bare board. We send it off to a company that basically sands the board, and they scan it as they do it, so they get the fresh board from us. They'll scan the silkscreen layer, which is all the markings on the board, and then they create a file off of that, CAD file, called a Gerber file, and then they sand it down, they expose the first copper layer, and they'll scan that and create this Gerber file again, this CAD file, and they sand the next layer, and they keep doing this for all 5 layers of the board, and when they're done, you pay them your few $100, and they send you back all the Gerber files. All we did was send the Gerber files to the production house and say, hey, we'll take 10 of these, thanks, and they send us back. In my years, for those 10 years that had passed at that point, and fixing Transwarps and starting to get an understanding of this chip kind of controls this chip kind of does this. I have no schematic. That was Jeff Body, as I mentioned earlier. He really started the schematic project, and we kind of helped him finish, giving him all the CAD files. Like, look, we have all the buried traces. We can tell you where things go. He was going through it with a multimeter, doing it by hand. I'm just shaking my head like, what a nut. This is a huge undertaking. There's 100 some odd components on the board. He's tracing them out by hand, and all of them have like 15 or 20 pins minimally. That's thousands of connections. He's doing it by hand, going beep, beep. Okay, it goes to here. Write that down on a spreadsheet. Like, wow. Okay, well, hey, buddy, hey, for $350, you too can get Gerber files. Like, what are you doing? But that's kind of as an old school guy, and he's had formal training. Him and Gabriel Gorla and Koichi Nishida, Playman in Bulgaria, these guys have all had formal training. I'm a hack. But that's kind of what I brought to even my own business. Like, I just kind of saw things from an outside perspective because I didn't let some semi-failure in school tell me how it's supposed to be done. It's like, look, this works. I'm just going to do it. If I make money at it or not, that's a whole nother story. But this works. Why don't you just do it? Get the A to B as simplest, as inexpensively as you can, and here you go. Here's a Transwarp, basically. So we built them. They take hours to build. Like I said, there's hundreds of components on the thing. And we tested them, and they run great because they're modern components. All of them pretty much hit 18 megahertz at no trouble. And before I came on the scene, they were doing like 12 to 13 maybe. I didn't do much. All I did was put stuff in new chips and go, here you go. Occasionally there was a chip or two that needed to be replaced. That was kind of dumb luck on my part finding half this stuff, but sometimes it is dumb luck, I guess. I mean, now that Jeff Bodie produced the schematic and kind of see, oh yeah, that's why this would work. But before then, nobody had any clue. But you experiment on it. It's a $400 board. And back then there were 300 or so, 200. But what's the worst case? You break one? Like, there's a ton of Apple stuff. That's kind of why I got into Apple as well. There's a ton of stuff. It's all low price. It's a very inexpensive hobby. I got guys who are in the cars, and they could spend $400 or $500 on a sticker or on a windshield or a windshield wiper. You know, it's just original. It's got the original chrome. It's like, really? Like, that's okay.
There's some weird economics there, maybe because the Transwarps were so sought after, the prices were really high, and frankly, a lot of them were dying from heat as well. So maybe the perception got created that it was this, unobtainium mysterious board that nobody knew how it worked and it wasn't clonable or whatever. Just sort of that sort of legend of the Transwarp kind of fed on itself maybe. And until no one had come along and been like, you know what, I bet we can just sand this thing down and send it away and solve the problem.
More guts and brains, yeah. I've been told that, yeah. It really was a very boring project as far as projects go. And the 8 meg RAM card definitely was a lot more intense. I learned a lot more. Version 2 of the Transwarp will be a lot more intense, and I'll definitely break new ground there. But until then,
Can you talk about that a bit? What do you mean by version 2 of the Transwarp?
Well, version 2, now that we have a known good schematic, we have a known good starting point as far as a board we can actually work on. I don't prefer to work on original equipment. It pains me dearly to see original equipment destroyed in the pursuit of enlightenment, happiness, whatever. But it just pains me that I had to destroy a Transwarp and send it off to be sanded, or a 3.5 drive controller to be, again, destroyed and sanded. It just it makes me grip my teeth and just puts me on edge. But I had no choice. These things weren't super rare. It wasn't a prototype, so I kind of was like, okay. But I just hate to see guys kind of just, I'll just take a Sawzall and put a hole in my case. There's better ventilation. It's like, no! Why would you do that? It's just, I've been, one of my hopes, aspirations, like the 2E kit, is to kind of, here's a 2E kit. You can solder to it. You're not destroying an original motherboard. You're not desoldering sockets and replacing them. You're not risking damage. It's an original. These are 30 years old. They're not getting any younger. Neither are we. And I'd like to see them preserved. I'd like to be able to see, not them under glass, but also being able to be used as well in their original form. It's nice to trick them out and get that ultimate system you wanted back in high school as a kid, unless you were credit carding things and being extremely nefarious, which I have no knowledge of that at all, then, it just, you never had this stuff. It's very, very rare. But as far as version 2, we would be able to have a platform to work on. Number one, we'd be able to take the original version 1, start pulling chips off, and ultimately rolling them in to a larger, or as I call it, complex programmable logic device, a CPLD. Or in this case, it'll probably be an FPGA, which is basically a CPU-type custom logic chip. And ultimately, the goal would be to replace the 816 as well. I don't think there's a lot of bottleneck at the 816. I know it's good for well over 20 megahertz, but I'd like to see something even faster. Like, what is the limit? You're just feeding stuff back onto the Apple bus, essentially, so there is that limit. But can I make stuff that just runs on the board and all it does is send video signals, possibly? Can I get it to a few hundred megahertz or gigahertz, possibly? So that's kind of what I would like to break ground with. Not just getting it all into a chip, a custom chip, but hopefully making it open source as well, and that may spur on some more development and tinkering in that field as well. So that's kind of what version 2 is, and it's very loose. We really haven't begun anything in it, but that's kind of the goal.
Now, you do have some products that are in the pipeline that are a little bit closer to release than that. Are you able to talk about any of those at this point?
Sure. The big ones, I guess, are a VGA adapter, the IDA 2C drive. There's mocking boards that just came out. We're also looking at producing a Phasor. The power supply, I think we spoke briefly about that before. So, any one of those interested?
I'm interested in all of those.
Yes, me too.
Okay.
Very excited about the idea 2C drive.
Yeah, that kind of came out of the microdrive turbo a little bit. Some people, I'll leave them nameless, tend to hoard things, their information, and I find that very counterproductive in a small community. If somebody was to come up and ask me, hey, can I have this? I'd be like, yeah. I don't know what you're going to do with it, and keep in mind it's, open for kind of Creative Commons. If you sell it, we may have an issue there necessarily. I mean, you better discuss your plans with me before just taking it and trying to compete with me, for instance, because that doesn't really help the community either, in my opinion. If it did, great, I get it, but in my opinion, it just really wouldn't help the community to have two guys kind of fighting for the same 100 board sales. It just... And that was one reason I never kind of went after like the CFFA market. The microdrive turbo's fast. The CFFA has a ton of options compared to the microdrive. It's a great board. Rich is an amazing guy. He's had some good guys on his team with testing and ideas and everything. Could I duplicate it? Yeah, but why? Like, am I going to compete for what, 300 board sales? The Ethernet. I mean, I was busting Glenn's stones for a while. Like, are you going to do this? Because I'm going to take it and make it here. Like, people want this. He's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm like, you better do it. Hurry up. Trying to push him on a little bit. I mean, could I do it? Sure. I don't know what I'm doing, essentially, but I could figure out enough and get the right people on the job. It's what I do. And I could figure that part out. That's easy enough. But, like, get it out there. People want it, and he's a pretty smart guy as well. And just like, come on, hurry up. I mean, these guys have lives as well, so I kind of get it. But with like the microdrive, like I said, it's just, I was a little disappointed. I kept asking like, hey, can you release this? Can you release that? And it's like, we could make it better. And it's like, no. And I've known other guys in the community. It's like, oh, I have this. I'm like, well, why don't you release it? And I'm actually guilty as that as well. Back in 2007, throw myself under the bus. Tony Diaz brought some classified Apple II documents and we copied them. And it's like, oh, we got to get our names on these and get them out. But they're old blueprints, basically. They're old vellum, so they're really dark, and some of it is a little nebulous. I mean, they're not bad shape, but we got them kind of in the nick of time. And so at least they're preserved digitally. But we need help getting them into a more current form, preferably something like a PDF that would be digital, and or just recreate them in its entirety and then put the scanned version below it. But I'm just as guilty. Like, I just haven't had the time. But guys like the Koichi Nishida said, hey, can you send me some IOUs? And I'm like, well, I can do better. I think I have the schematic, like actual Apple's intellectual material that they sent off to VLSI to have made, or Harris or one of those companies. Like, I think I have that. He's like, really? Like, yeah, that would work. Okay, here you go. Like, hope this solves your problem. And hence there's VGA boards now and other things like that.
Personally, I'm looking forward to the Phasor clone, because those things are unobtainium these days. You don't ever see them on eBay or any other place like that. And yeah, the Mockingboard's great, but the Phasor does so much more. And so I just got a fistful of dollars that I'm going to throw at you at K-Fest, and I expect to be presented with one of these boards, Henry. Come on.
Well, there is some news on the Phasor front. Tom Arnold, again, of philosophyofsound.com. He's helped us with the Mockingboard. He's kind of a sound guru, gurus and other things, but mostly sound. And he's helped us quite a bit with pulling the board apart, producing a schematic, and also testing some new chips, potential replacements for what's on the board. What's there, obviously, is like early 1980s tech. And there's been a few things produced since then. So it's like, hey, we could use this, we could do that. So he's kind of testing some of that for us. And the problem with the device, AE is famous. They loved programmable logic because it saved them all kinds of chips and all kinds of real estate and costs and power savings. But it makes it hard to copy these boards. So we've got in contact with a few people overseas who actually have a clue on how to copy some of the easier PALs. And we have a buddy over there. We send them a chip, and he actually managed to copy them for us. I was very surprised. So we've got kind of the keys to the kingdom here. So now it's a matter of testing stuff, getting the time, number one, testing stuff, and ultimately getting something put together and getting it to market. So that will happen. There's 100 things on the front burner now. There's still Mockingboards selling. There's still speech chips. So will it happen anytime soon? I don't think, like, very, very soon, but I'd like to see it, yes. And it's definitely possible.
For those of us who are a bit ignorant, can you guys go over the differences between the Mockingboard and the Phasor? Other than, I know they're both soundboards, but I don't know a lot more than that.
Oh, basically, not to get super techie, but basically the Mockingboard is 6 voices. So you could have 6 beeps and boops and all little clicks that the Apple does coming at your speakers. My addition to the board was to add the 2E speaker basically onto the Mockingboard, so you have all your little beeps and boops coming out of speakers rather than having the 2E beep separate. That just seems stupid to me. The Phasor is a Mockingboard, basically 2 Mockingboards, so you get 12 beeps and boops as opposed to 6. It also does Echo Plus emulation, and it did something else. I think it also does just a Mockingboard mode, if I remember, so you can kind of disable half the board. So it's a little more gooder than the average Mockingboard. Would the average user see the more gooderness? Probably not, but there's a few games out there that take advantage of it, so you will get a little more fun, a little more bang for your buck when you buy one.
And didn't one of those 2 boards have sockets for speech chips or something?
So yeah, the Phasors came with dual speech chips. Some of the Mockingboards, there was 5 or 6 different revisions. I can't even keep them all straight. Some of the earlier ones used the SCO1 speech chip, which was it was good, but the SCO2 or their second revision was a lot better. SSI 263, same chip. It was a lot better. It was a little more normal sounding, if you want to call Stephen Hawking's voice normal. Speak and spell, it's not kind of quote unquote normal. It's not intelligible at least. But it also had a little more beeps and boops as well, had a little more frequency, I believe. So it was a better chip all around. And some of the later Mockingboards used the SCO2 chip, or the SSI 263 chip. And some didn't use the chip at all.
All right. Well, Henry, this has been great. Are there any announcements or anything that we missed that we should have asked you?
Well, the only other thing I could think of really is the IDA 2C project, the IDA 2C drive. It's going to be basically internal board, think AE ZRAM Ultra basically. It'll have, the goal is 4 megs of RAM. It'll have a Phasor, a 12 voice speech board on it, or a 12 voice soundboard on it, a clock, and we're kind of tinkering with some other stuff, but I'd like to see a Pi added to it. I don't know physically how that would work. There's going to be some connections, but ultimately everything is going to be wireless. I think the connections for the storage, the mass storage part, will be like a Toshiba Flash Air. That seems to be working very well with the Nishida Radio's Unidrive Air, I want to say it's called. And I think we're going to do some sort of Bluetooth stereo out, so it'll work with just your standard $10 eBay special Bluetooth to component video or component audio adapter. It would work with your phone, your average higher end audio component devices would all have that built in. There's Bluetooth wireless speakers even, so you don't have to worry about extra cables in your 2C. The only other project I could think of, like I said, the power supply project, and we're hoping just to have a kit basically that would a user be able to install and use. The only other thing, we're working with John McMaster at siliconpron.org, PER0N, with digitizing the IWM and the swim chip. We've decapped a few of them, and if you haven't seen his site, they've got silicon art on up to like how ARMs work. And these, I don't know how else to describe them, but nutcases to basically pull chips apart and spend hours and weeks of their time digitizing how the different layers in the chips connect. So they literally delayer chips. Yeah, it's amazing work. These guys are so committed. They're really smart. I'm hoping to possibly do some of their dirty work and figure out what they do and how they do what they do. Again, it's just a new area. And if so, then that will allow us to kind of recreate the 3.5 drive controller project in custom logic, because the swim is a major part of that for the floppy support. IWM is a major part in other projects as well. But just to get a better understanding of Apple's custom logic is kind of my goal as well, to be able to get that out there to the community. It's just amazing stuff those guys do. Again, I like being open source. We always try to get schematics out there. I think the CV Tech and the RamWorks 3 more recently is, and the gals for the Transwarp are definitely a statement to that. And I look at it as a type of geek immortality. You get to, hopefully somebody will take some of the work I've done and use it in their work. I know I've stood on some pretty broad shoulders to get where I am, and it'd be nice to be able to give back, and hopefully somebody could stand on my shoulders and get a little further and be part of that chain would be neat.
For sure. It's the nerd version of having children.
Kind of, yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome.
And then plugs for things. Obviously, Facebook. If you go to Reactive Micro USA on Facebook, you can keep up on our blogs. UltimateApple2.com. We've got some forums there for support. Apple II Heaven. Great products. Nishida Radio Chapter 3. Joe's Computer Museum. We're working with Joe Strasnider, I believe. Sorry, Joe, I can't pronounce your name. It's Strasnider, yes. And if you search Joe's Computer Museum on YouTube.com, he's going to be doing, hopefully, a few reviews for us. So you'll actually be able to see possibly even some prototypes show up there. And he'll give you what he thinks, how they work. We'll work with them, basically. I wish I had more time. I'd love to be able to do better documentation. I'd love to be able to have a YouTube channel and get more into it. I'm a huge fan of like Vsauce and EVV blog, Veritasium. In a nutshell, these guys just do amazing work out there to get information out there, and just real mentors. And Joe Strasner was one of the guys who contacted us and said, "Hey, I want to get into EEPROMs." It's like, okay, here, I'll send you some equipment. Have a go at it. Do a review of it. And of course, siliconforeign.org. Check them out. They got all kinds of neat stuff.
That's great. Yeah, we'll definitely link to all of that in the show notes. And I think I can speak for the whole community when I say we're very excited for all those new products. So we'll be watching ultimatemicro.com with intention and our wallets in hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. You want to stick around and do some news with us, Henry?
Ooh, can I?
All right. Well, let's roll on into that, shall we?
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
Looks like our first item here is yours, Mike. Start us off.
Okay, so our first item this month is the floppy disk preservation project. It's at diskpreservation.com, and it's started out as a Commodore serial number registry, and the site owner, whose name escapes me at the moment, has recently set up a system for tracking your earlier Apple IIs, meaning your Apple II, your 2 Plus, Euro Plus, J Plus, the Bell and Howell. None of the later machines like the 2E or anything, but I think that's because those are really, really common. But at any rate, there's a number of machines already posted up there. I think we're up to 45 now. So if you want to show off and make your friends feel bad that their serial number is higher than yours, you can post all that information at, again, diskpreservation.com, and we'll have a link in the show notes.
That's pretty cool. And in my day job, I'm a bit of a data nerd as part of our business, and so it's always cool to see data gathered. I wonder if there'll be some things we can deduce from this, similar to what Brutal Deluxe was doing, collecting 2GS serial numbers in an effort to estimate the production numbers. I wonder if the same could be done for other Apple II models.
That'd be interesting. I know that over at applefritter.com, they're fans of the Rev Zero and stuff like that. And some of the guys there some of the people there have gone really, really deep in figuring out, okay, how many rev zeros were there, and at what serial number did they switch over from the dark green or the light green slots to the dark green slots and stuff like that. I mean, it's really inside baseball on it, but if you're into that kind of information, there's a lot to be had over at Apple Fritter too, so check that out.
Cool. Plus, it's good to know how many there were, so you know how guilty you should feel if you need to destroy one for reverse engineering, as Henry was alluding to.
Henry.
Yeah, I know. Well, part of that, actually, I like the work they do, because I know Anton was putting together serial numbers with the GSs, and I had a question of, I ran into issues with the slot maker on different revision ROM 1 boards, because Apple changed from a slot maker revision A to revision B, whatever that is. Could be a new encapsulation, but I don't think so. I think there's something physically different with the chip, because I've actually pulled chips off of boards and swapped them around, and problems I had in one GS went away, and the problems occurred in the GS that was working. I'm pretty sure, yeah, so I'd like to be able to put a caveat in a note saying, hey, if you bought microdrive and you have this revision and it's before this serial number, I would love to be able to do that to try and resolve issues, because I'm sure there's people out there struggling going, why does it work here and it doesn't work here? There's problems. But no, it might be a fine GS. It's just unfortunate that its specs are a little off, and that's why they fixed it.
Yeah, there's a similar situation with the 2C Pluses. Is it James Littlejohn who does the 2C Plus accelerator workshops at Kansas Fest? And there's, I guess, the 2 custom chips related to the accelerator, and there's 4 different combinations of those 2 chips, and certain combinations work and certain don't. So part of his workshop is you have to find another 2C Plus owner if yours isn't compatible, and if the 2 of you swap this chip, then you can both now be accelerated. It's this very strange situation.
I think I got myself banned from those workshops.
How so?
The last time I was at Kansas Fest, so I think it was the first time that they did this, and James, we did the work on one of my 2C pluses to speed it up, but when we turned it back on, nothing happened, nothing at all. You just click, the power light goes on, and that's all it does, and we couldn't figure out what was going on and what was wrong with it, and James was starting to get a little bit worried, and he took the 2C plus, and the next day calls me over to his room, and he wasn't there, and Anthony was in there, and he's like, I'll just let James explain this to you. And it turned out those little round, cushiony washer things. I had left those in the plastic case, and so they were on the bottom of the board making contract.
Oh.
So yeah, I don't think I'm allowed back into the workshop. But if you go to Kansas Fest and you have a 2C plus that you want accelerated, definitely check out that workshop. Those things are great.
Classic.
All the workshops,
classic
yes. Yeah.
All right.
Definitely. Solder Fest is one of those as well. Great workshops.
Cool. Well, moving right along, we talked about in the interview with Henry there about A2 Heaven, plumbing the Mad Bulgarian's new web store. This is a little bit old news now, but being that we're a monthly podcast and we skipped an episode to chew the fat with some friends of the show last month, this is a bit late to the news section. But nevertheless, the web store that everyone has been waiting for is finally online, so you can go buy your Apple IIc to VGA adapters and all that good stuff. So I myself have the Apple IIc VGA adapter, and it is fantastic. Works exactly as you would hope.
You're not sure how many people are still out there that don't know that the shop is open, but report on it anyway.
This is why we're not a news show, folks.
That's right.
Because we're
I think
terrible
his biggest problem has been keeping things in stock.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, there was some real pent-up demand for a number of his products, for sure. All right, well, speaking of everyone's favorite products, it looks like Ivan Drucker's updated A2 server. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, so he's updated the package to 1.2.5. The main feature of this is now that it offers a GSOS 6.0.1 for network booting, which is really cool. And it also supports the community releases of 6.0.2 and 6.0.3 and includes the HFS FST with install and some minor bug fixes. So if you're using Ivan's A2 server, now's the time. Actually, this was back in November, so it's past the time where you should have gone out and got the update already.
Yeah, this is I like these products of Ivan's. It's A2 server and A2 cloud and related things. They're kind of they do a lot of sort of dumb computer tricks that you would not expect, but they're actually genuinely useful as well. If you want to play with your Apple II in and around the internet, there's a few easier or neater ways to do it, I think.
Yeah, and just for anyone who doesn't know, A2 Server is the excuse me, A2 Server is the set of programs that allows you to easily use any computer, including the Raspberry Pi, as a file server and network boot host for Apple II computers.
Yes, I like it a lot.
Yeah, in fact, a couple of years ago at Kansas Fest, Ivan gave a sort of bizarre but fascinating demo involving this product, and I think Peter Neubauer was involved as well, where they demoed sort of shelling into the Raspberry Pi and then running Sweet 16 on it and sort of emulating a 2GS on a 2E. It was bizarre and fascinating.
Just like Ivan, bizarre and fascinating.
Yes. These are the kinds of things you can do. All right. Speaking of bizarre and fascinating, French Touch continues to do impressive things with the Apple II in the sort of adorable, as Kevin Savitz would say, demo scene on the Apple II. And 1977, all right? Just keep that in mind. 1977. So the latest demo from French Touch is called raster bars. And for anyone who doesn't know what a raster bar is, it's sort of this thing that came out of the Commodore 64 demo scene where like some retro computers, including the 2GS, in fact, they have some limited control of the color of the overscan area of the monitor. And, through registers and very careful cycle counting and timing, with or without interrupts, depending on the machine, you can change the color of the background and then back again and effectively get, horizontal lines that appear out in the overscan area of the monitor outside where the pixels are. And of course, most famously, the FTA Christmas demo did this to extreme effect on the 2GS, and to the point where they actually got text rendering in the overscan area, which is mind melting. And so sort of creating these horizontal lines and using different colors to make it look sort of like pipes or something, round objects moving up and down. They're known as raster bars. And they come out of that Cracktro and Scene demo on the C64. So, of course, the 8-bits don't have any kind of overscan control or VIO registers of that nature. But French Touch has kind of done a pretty convincing version of it using some snazzy low-res graphics. So it looks much better than you would expect based on that description of it. And there's some Mockingbird sound in there as well, and some impressive high-res graphics effects as well. So, those folks continue to push the 8-bits farther than I think most of us thought possible.
Mockingbird sound support? Oh, it's a shame. There's actually just a few Mockingboards left in the store at UA2. Shameless plug.
Yeah, it's good. Well timed. All right. Next item is mine also. Just a random plug for the Antic Atari Buatari podcast. It's a good listen, even if you're not into that scene. Those guys are doing bang up work there. And at one point in Antic interview 45, they made a reference to the Apple community and whether or not we're listening. And so I just wanted to say, yes, we are listening, and we hear everything that you say about us. Buatari.
Yes, Kevin, we're monitoring you closely. Especially, I loved his interview with William D. Mensch of Western Design Center, the creator of the 6502. Yeah. What a great interview. Mm-hmm. Well worth the listen.
Yeah, that one captivated a lot. Yeah, it was half engineering retrospective and half philosophy of life by Bill Mensch. Yeah, very interesting. It gets pretty meta towards the end.
Yeah, Kevin in between, I don't know what to ask you. Hold on. Coming up with questions. It was great. Yeah. Good listen.
Yeah, towards the end, it kind of went weird places. Yes. Yeah, Bill's a very interesting guy. I actually worked sort of indirectly with him a little bit when I was looking to do some software for them for their new 6502 based hobbyist development boards. Did not end up gaining traction, but yeah, interesting guy for sure.
And from now on, this podcast will be known as the Boo Atari Podcast.
I think it was already known as that.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Much to the consternation of at least one listener.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along. Let's see. We got Apple IIs in Berlin, Mike. What's going on here? Or Apple II celebrities, anyway.
So this is Geek Fest 2016 that happened, 2015 that happened in Berlin. And I don't know how we as a community missed this because some of the panels are for all the names that you want to hear from. There's Bruce Damer from the DigiBarn, and there's a panel with Andy Hertzfeld and Randy Wigginton, Daniel Kotke and the infamous hacker and phreaker Cheshire Catalyst, Pirates Dan Sokol and Roy Nordblom, and even Lee Felsenstein, who was, I think, either the founder or one of the original members. I know he was an original member of the Homebrew Computer Club. And they streamed all of their panels, but it looks like fortunately for us, those of us who didn't know about this, the recordings are now available on YouTube to watch.
Yay.
Pretty amazing watch, definitely. Yeah, I don't know when we'll get a group like that together again. So
yep, definitely spend the time to listen to that.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about Virtual 2 on the show here. It's certainly our favorite emulator, but it's certainly not the only one. Of course, there's also Apple Win, which is good. And there's another kind of lesser known one called the Apple II Plus Simulator. And this is an entirely in-browser thing. And I guess I would liken it to Call Apple's in-browser emulator, which is virtualappletwo.org. Is that right?
Yay.
I may not have that right, but we'll have the URL right in the show notes. So this is along those lines. It's an in-browser emulator, and there's a little drop-down menu where you can swap out the disk images and play with it that way. It's a pretty neat thing because it does a lot of sort of emulation of video artifacts and curvature of the glass CRT and some of that kind of stuff that you don't usually see in emulators. So definitely a neat kind of thing to play with. Maybe not as sort of powerful for development like Virtual 2, but yeah, definitely nice to see more emulators kicking around. Have you guys played with this one?
I haven't.
I have. Yeah. This is specifically a 2 Plus. I don't think you can change it to a different kind of Apple II. But it is similar to the Virtual 2, where there are menus where you can just click the disk image that you want to boot, and you can hit run, and it's off and running. It does allow you, access to some utilities. You've got the stop and trace and 6502 regression tests and that sort of thing. So, and probably like Quinn said, not ideal for development, but you can at least see kind of what's running under the hood there.
Yeah, I'm not a 2 or 2 Plus kind of guy. I tinker a little bit, but I'm more of a virtual Apple org guy. I like to fire up an occasional game or two during a lunch or a pizza and relax.
Yeah, the challenge for me with these kinds of in-browser emulators is always getting the joystick to work, because that's, of course, so important for most Apple II games. And yeah, we talked a little bit about that last month. Charles Mangan and Retro Connector have some solutions there that work with some of the web-based emulators, like the one on archive.org. I wonder if it would work with this Apple II Plus simulator as well. Be interesting to see.
It's too bad nobody knows Charles and could ask him.
Yeah. Oh, well, unsolvable problem. Moving right along. So we like to call ourselves the Apple II podcast of record, and arguably the only Apple II podcast, Carrington, who has not updated 1 megahertz in 500 years. But
he keeps promising to.
Yes, he says he's got two or something episodes in the can, and yet they are not being published. Grumble. Now, there is technically one other podcast in active production, but I'm sure I'm not the only person who thought this one was gone. John Romero's Apple Time Warp podcast. Now, he did one episode, was it 6 months or a year ago?
No, it was late 2013, so a lot later.
2013. Wow, okay. I didn't realize it was that long ago. And it was great, and everybody was super excited for a new Apple II podcast, and by none other than John Romero. And then it vanished. So I think Personally, I had deleted it from my podcatcher. I am assuming many people did, assuming that was it. But, keep the faith, because episode 2 was just released and it's great. So hopefully this is a sign of things to come. This time in 2017, maybe we can expect episode 3.
Yeah, I know he's a busy guy, but come on, John, 2013. Actually, it's really great because of John's, celebrity status and his years with id, and then that god-awful game that we won't talk about that he made after that. He has access. he has access sometimes to people and situations that maybe we here on Open Apple wouldn't, and so he's able to tell the stories and talk to people talk to people in unique situations and get bits of history out there, and it's just great to hear his experiences, especially with the Apple, because a lot of these guys, came up on the Apple and don't talk about it anymore, Bill Budge, and won't, or have just moved on or forgotten. And so it's great to see John still involved heavily with the stuff. I know he runs a disc collectors group and some other stuff, and he's got some unique items that he loves to talk about. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, he asks good questions, and yeah, as you say, that he's able to get, I think, or he will be able to get interviews that, a lot of us can't. We've, as you alluded to, we've been trying for many years to get Bill Budge on the show, and we tried again this month to no avail. So we are trying, folks, but maybe John can succeed where we have failed there.
Bill just doesn't like us.
Yeah, I'll throw one other thing out about this podcast. They're using an interesting feature of podcasts that very few shows do, which is that there's this obscure feature that allows you to show images while the show is playing on your iPhone or whatever. Right in the podcast player, it'll bring up an image that switches out kind of like a slideshow automatically as the show runs. And they're actually using that. So as they're talking, you can kind of see a picture of what they're talking about. So, they'll bring up screenshots of the games they're talking about, or, at one point they talk about magnetic core memory. So they bring up an image of that, so you know what it looks like. So it's a cool kind of media feature that I don't think I've ever seen any other podcasts do. So it's neat that they're doing that.
Metcast does that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because it means you kind of have to sit there and stare at your iPhone while you listen to the podcast, which, as an audio medium, I think most of us are just listening to it while we do other things. But it's neat that they're trying stuff like that anyway. All right. Well, Mike, are you an Android user? Is there
I used to be when I switched over to iPhone, but there's Maui Aaron is the username he gave A2 Central. Sent them a message over there that there is now an emulator called Apple IIX or iX or something. It's a 2 emulator, runs on Android. It's designed to be cross-platform, Mac, Linux, BSD desktop, and then iOS, Android mobile only. Only the Android version is officially released and supported at this time. There are a number of features that he describes, including the minimalist touch keyboard and touch joystick. Making playing of old arcade titles on the touchscreen feel seamless, which that's been a problem for a long time with a lot of this stuff. There's support going all the way back to Android Gingerbread, which I think is several years old now. Minimal permissions, and it's currently out in the Play Store, so you can go download that right now because it's free.
Cool.
I'm starting to wonder if Apple II is becoming more ubiquitous now than in like 85.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
For sure.
Jeez, there's emulators everywhere, online, this and that, games available. Wow.
Now, I know it's not the only Apple II emulator for Android, because there's one called Candy Apple, but I don't know how that. It's been a while since I think that's been updated, and I know there were problems with that, so I don't know how this compares to that, but it's worth probably checking out.
Yeah, the internet has this power to concentrate fandom in a way that's really unprecedented. So yeah, the community can seem, much bigger than it is. And the great thing about that is it draws more and more people in, as we see on the Apple II Facebook enthusiasts group. You can tell how it's growing because, every week the same 10 questions get asked about how do I plug in a VGA monitor and how do I, start with no floppy disks and so on. So yeah, the fact that people are still asking these same questions means new people are coming into the community all the time. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Couple new faces. We see it all the time too.
All right, well, let's see. Speaking of the active community, there's also a lot of software development going on these days, and the AppleSoft extension called PureSoft has been updated. This is a really cool thing. It started as an effort, and it's still mainly, I guess, an effort to add integer math to AppleSoft. A lot of people may not realize that all of the math in AppleSoft is done as floating point. So even if you do 2 plus 4, it's actually doing 2.0 plus 4.0, and all of that is getting, parsed and sent through the whole floating point unit and so on, or the floating point routines rather in AppleSoft, and it's all very, very, very slow, and you basically providing support for a lot of precision that you don't need for 99.9% of things you're going to do in AppleSoft. So PureSoft gives you direct integer support, and so it's a really neat thing. So it does a lot of other things as well, but seems to be its primary focus. So if you're into AppleSoft and want to get a little more speed out of your math, you should give it a try. All right, let's see, Squirt. That's a delicious sounding product. Mike, what's this about?
So someone named Rob in Saskatchewan sent this in to Call Apple. They have this new, so Call Apple has this new section called Write Apple, where you can submit programs that they will host for download for you if you like. And this is one called Squirt. It is a program launcher, and I guess this has been, he says it's been around for a little while, it looks like, and this is the updated version, or maybe it was in beta and now it's final. Anyway, let's see, what does he say it can do? Squirt can navigate directories with ease and minimum keystrokes, launch system, binary, and AppleSoft programs, view text source and mouse text screen files, as well as bitmap fonts and high-res and double high-res graphics screens. It can automatically recognize the difference between a binary graphics file, binary text file, binary program file, and binary font files. So that's freely available to download right now at Call Apple, and of course the link will be in the show notes.
I can't wait to try that out.
That's pretty cool. All right, so we talk a lot about 4am on the show, but 4am is not the only person doing lots of sort of cracking related activities. So there's on 4am's Twitter feed, which of course you should all be following, there's often talk of this other cracker called, I'm going to say qkumba, for lack of any other knowledge on how to pronounce that. And qkumba has actually helped 4am a lot with the cracks, but now on COMSYS Apple II, qkumba is using these cracking skills to get DOS 3.3 based games to run in ProDOS, which is means you can install them on your hard drive or whatever. So that's very cool. Now, if you read 4am's Twitter feed, you know that a lot of these floppy, bit-based games had their own custom, operating systems as part of their copy protection. Usually they were based on DOS 3.3 in some way. Often the read-write track sector routines were ripped right out of DOS 3.3, much to 4am's amusement. Sometimes, having multiple versions of those routines on the same game. So what it means is basically you have to, extract kind of the binary executable of the game and sort of separate it, decouple it, if you will, from all this custom operating system stuff and kind of patch it in to work with normal ProDOS stuff. So,
wizardry.
Sorry, Henry?
It's all wizardry.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, it's interesting because at the end of the day, any game is still just code that's going to sit in RAM and run, and that's going to be compatible. That's independent of the operating system. So, you just have to sort of find all the places where the game touches the disk, which for arcade games and so on is not that often. Mostly they live in memory. So if you can find all those places where they touch the disk and use their own custom routines and just kind of patch those in to use standard ProDOS routines, and then of course you also have to potentially patch, memory allocation and so on if they're doing their own tricky things with aux banks or the language card space, things like that, then ProDOS is going to get unhappy. So there's potential problems there. But it's a lot of the same skills you would use in cracking can be used to get these games to run in ProDOS independently of these wacky custom OSs. So qkumba has been doing that and has gotten Swashbuckler and Conan and a lot of other favorites going so far. So this is really a fantastic effort and a great application of cracking skills.
Yeah, I think this sort of started as an effort to turn, you get a disc that had a single game on it, and they thought, what a waste of space. And once you pull all the programs apart, like you said, Quinn, and load them in memory and save, and load in memory and save it, and then kind of link everything together, they found that you could get a bunch of these games all on one disk. And then from there, it kind of went to, well, that's great, but these are still just DOS 3.3, which means no hard drive and a lot less portability. And so now we've gone to, let's convert everything over to ProDOS, which is really cool.
Yeah. Interestingly, they would sometimes go too far with that in the effort to get more games on a disk. And like we learned recently with Lady Tut, they had, the original Cracker had crammed that onto, into a single file on a disk with 5 other games, a copy of which we probably all had. And it turns out they had cut out the big animation sequence at the end of the game and most of the levels and all this other stuff that nobody knew was in the game because we all played this cracked version that really only had 4 or 5 levels in it. So, yeah, it's good to see these efforts to get these games back. And speaking of 4am and cracking and so on, Antoine Vigneault, friend of the show, has kind of lately turned into what I'll call 4am GS. Antoine has been over on hacktheapple.com, which I think is Antoine's forum site. Is that right? All right. Well, in any case, over on hacktheapple.com, Antoine has been cracking 2GS games in very much the same way as 4am has been doing on Twitter. And he's been documenting them to a similar extent. So if you like 4am's Twitter feed, you should definitely follow Antoine on Twitter, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. And he links to his write-ups over on hacktheapple.com. So ever the stalwart 2GS preserver is Antoine.
Indeed.
And let's see. So now we got some action with AppleWorks. This is really cool. I think Randy Brandt's going to be very excited to hear about this one. Tell us about Hugh Hood, Mike.
Yeah, so Hugh Hood is a huge AppleWorks fan, and I had the privilege and opportunity to work with him when I was scanning the NOG AppleWorks forum magazines, and he provided me with a bunch of information and utilities and things like that I didn't have. And he's written a whole lot of, just useful little AppleWorks utilities and routines over the years. And I guess now he's starting to release init packs is what he's calling them. This is init pack 2016. It's a collection of 6 new inits. It works with AppleWorks 5.1. This one includes WP status 24, which I think is the word processor status. There's the DB status for the database, SS status for the spreadsheet, and then there's show path, max desk, and finder launch. And I know that he has been working with Randy Brandt actually specifically on this directly. So that was released in December. And so if you are, for whatever reason, still using AppleWorks, there you go.
I'm actually kind of amazed, as deep as I am, or I consider myself as deep as I am in the workings and the Apple II community. I'm always amazed when somebody says they use AppleWorks or Dazzle Draw or something. I always just kind of shake my head. It's like I do this for my own edification and then to understand things a little more. And at no point when I go, okay, I need to write a resume, I'm going to fire up cut and paste or Apple Write or one of these. I'm like, what? What do you guys do with it? It's amazing to hear there's still guys that use this. Just like you can go to Google Documents. Isn't that more efficient? And you can share it. And I'm just amazed that people still use this stuff.
Yeah, I think at least some of it is just sort of just for the nostalgia of it and just to kind of play with it as a project to write an AppleWorks plugin is kind of a neat, little thing to play with. I don't know. Hard to say if anyone still uses it for serious work. Although Randy often has told the story that there was a watchmaker client of his in New York, I think, who was using AppleWorks to run his business up until 2003 or something.
Well, no, like last year.
Oh, was it last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally last year. Anthony and I got a call from a guy that said, "Hey, we got some old GSs. Do you want them?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he met over there, and it's like, "Oh, it's this guy." I'm like, "Oh, the watch guy? Are you kidding me? Like, I actually know about this guy." Hey, he gave us a bunch of GSs and old monitors and everything. We're like, yeah, thanks. We appreciate you donating to the cause. He still has a GS. He still uses it. He's trying to get away from it, but we talk to him every 6 months or something. He's like, no, I haven't forgotten about you guys. When I'm ready to switch totally, I'll let you know. But yeah, he still uses it.
Yeah, I think Randy had said that he was contracted to actually write a web-based version of some of the AppleWorks tools, so this guy can kind of transition to the cloud sort of by getting an AppleWorks kind of interface or something to that. That's pretty amusing stuff. Well, speaking of Beagle Brothers, Alan Bird got interviewed recently. Is that right, Mike?
That's true. Now, he was interviewed by Uno Cero. Did I pronounce that properly? I'm not sure.
Uno Cero, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So the interview text is in Spanish, and if you run it through Google Translator, you get sort of a close approximation to what he said. But it's always nice to hear when these guys surface. Of course, Alan was on our roundtable last year, the Beagle Brothers reunion roundtable, and it was great to hear from him. And so it's nice to see he's still kicking around and still thinking about Apple stuff.
Yeah. We'll link to we'll have a Google Translate link to the interview in the show notes. The Google Translate kind of bungles up the CSS in their website, but you'll see some gigantic icons and things. If you just scroll past that, the interview is down there, so don't mind that. And yeah, speaking of kind of retreading Open Apple territory, David Schroeder, who we spoke to recently, has been writing a blog for Gamasutra about his Apple II game exploits, and there was one on Crisis Mountain, and it looks like VentureBeat has kind of reprinted that article. I think it's the same. Is that right, Mike? Is there any additions in this?
I'm not seeing anything that wasn't in the original, but it's nice to see that a bigger media outlet picked up his writing and is publishing that for him.
Yep, always good for the community too. So this next article is very interesting. So it looks like a private collector has opened a sort of Apple museum in Prague. Tell us about that one, Mike.
So, it's exactly what you just said. It's it is a museum. He's calling it the Apple Museum. It's in Prague. It's apparently the largest private collection of Apple products, including Mac and iOS devices, and going all the way back to the original Apple product. He's got an Apple One set up in there. They're saying that there's something like 100,000 pieces in the collection. Obviously, they're not all going to be out at once. The place is set up sort of like an Apple store with kind of the low white tables and sort of cool, relaxing atmosphere about everything. But if you're there, check it out.
Has anybody contacted Sean Fahey for a comment? Because he might have over 100,000 pieces.
I would think so.
Yeah, him or Tony Diaz could probably give them a run for his money.
I'm not sure 30,000 RAM factor cards should count against that number.
Yeah, so this museum is very interesting. It's making the rounds because the physical presentation is really quite stunning. Among other things, he's got long tables set up with sort of timelines of the iPods, and they're kind of laid out on the table physically on a timeline of their development. He's recreated the famous iMac ad where they had all the candy-colored iMacs kind of in a circle viewed from above. He's actually recreated that with physical iMacs in a window. There's really, really beautiful displays. Now, where I think this gets very interesting, though, is, of course, Apple has always said they'll never make a museum, and they, because they're focused on the future and not the past, yada, yada. And this is most definitely not official. And where I think so, of course, there's nothing wrong with setting up a private collection and letting people come and see it. Where I think this guy's going to get into trouble is if you follow the links in the story to his website. The website is trying quite hard to look official. So it's called the Apple Museum. It's using Apple's logos and their trademarks, and there's nothing in there about it being unofficial. Using all kinds of product shots and marketing shots from Apple materials. So he's using their logos. The website is actually applemuseum.com, I believe, or .net. So he's gonna get a call from Apple's lawyers, I think, about this one. I mean, it's one thing to have a private collection that people come and look at. It's quite another to create legitimate brand confusion, which I think his site is definitely doing. So I look forward to the cease and desist there.
Yeah, you might want to, if you're planning to see it, you might want to go soon. Tickets are 11 euros, and there's like a 3D virtual tour online and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's definitely put a lot of effort into it. It may all be for naught, but fingers crossed that he lasts for a little while.
Yeah, being in Prague, he might be somewhat out of the reach of Apple's lawyers. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I know if you tried to do something like this in the States, as soon as you call yourself a museum and start charging for tickets, you cross a line where, I know I have some friends who've looked into this as being big collectors of things. And you cross a line there where now you have to, the fire marshal has to come in and inspect your building, and you need fire exits and, sprinklers, and, the government now has access to your books, and, there's all these sort of things that have to happen as soon as you're now a public building. And once you do that, then you also become this legal entity that now is, in the reach of Apple, because you're no longer just a private collector. So, I don't know if that also applies in Prague, but it'd be interesting to see what happens here. This guy's definitely playing with fire with his website.
Good luck, sir.
Yeah, yes. Well, Godspeed, I guess. All right. Let's see. It looks like Dan Bricklin is being interviewed again about VisiCalc. I always love to see stories like this one. Mike, tell us about this one.
Yeah. So Dan Bricklin is obviously he was one of the inventors of VisiCalc, and he is a fun, charismatic guy to talk to, and to if you have the chance to see him speak, it's definitely worth it. He's just generally a fun guy to be around, at least from what I've seen. I know that these days he mostly works on some note-taking program for iOS that's way overloaded with features. Sorry, Dan, I know you don't listen. So, but he's done a lot of interviews over the years. And what's nice about this one is like there's this. They have like an image, for example, it's a page from VisiCalc's 79 reference card, and he's gone through and talked about all the pieces of it. And it's a good interview. Check it out.
It is, yeah. The pull quote for me was at one point he says, I came out of the word processing and typesetting worlds where every keystroke counted. I was competing against the back of the envelope. And I think that's really the key there. We've talked about this in reference to VisiCalc before on the show, but VisiCalc, where it succeeded, I think, where it was the first software package to really succeed, was that it was genuinely a better way to do the same things that we'd been doing. It was genuinely better than an accounting ledger and a room full of bookkeepers. So, that it had to. That's a more difficult thing than you might think. To genuinely disrupt an industry, you have to actually be better, and not just like, for example, the canonical example for me is the Apple Newton. That first attempt at a PDA. It was not genuinely better than a paper calendar agenda book, which at the time was a very refined technology. The pages were standardized, and there was all kinds of cool options and dividers and so on. The Newton, if you used that, which I made a personal attempt to for a couple of years, you had to really want to use it for the sake of the technology and not because it was actually better. It was not. So VisiCalc was actually better. So I think that pull quote really sums that up.
Right, and VisiCalc, I think, legitimized the Apple II as it took it from being an electronic hobbyist machine into a legitimate home computer, and then something that people could use in their business as well. Lotus 123 later did the same thing for the IBM PC, and that's why they call it the Apple II killer app.
All right, well, that was a good chunk of news for this month, and I think that about wraps it up. Let's see, we don't, being a monthly show, we don't talk about eBay, but I think we have some eBay stuff. Shall we roll into that?
Sure.
Look, rare! Steve Jobs. Look what we found on eBay.
So this is a very interesting item that you found, Mike. It's an Apple IIc prototype. Now, that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but this one really does seem legit, doesn't it?
It did to me when I'm looking at looking at it, and there are a few tells that I guess Most Apple IIc prototypes have. Obviously is the lack of Apple IIc painted anywhere on it, but you can scrape that off, I think, pretty carefully these days. But the other one is the ventilation slots along the top. There's a little gap on the second one. It's shorter, and you can see where there probably was meant to be an Apple logo badge set. And on your standard 2C, there's the way the keyboard sort of butts up against the rest of the unit is different. And if you want an example of this, there's a book that I actually scanned a little while ago. It's called the Apple IIc User's Guide, I think. And the photograph that they use for the front cover of that is also a prototype, and it looks a whole lot like this one. So I think this is actually legitimate, which surprises me because it sold for $900.
Yeah, that is just astonishing. I mean, if this thing is legit, someone got an unbelievable steal here. Because we've seen, just regular market 2Cs new in box, go for $3,000, and millions of them were made. So the fact that this appears to be a legit prototype and someone got it for $900, I am just floored by that. When I first looked at this, my immediate thought was, oh no, it's just one of those South American clones, right? Because there was a bunch of Eastern European and South American clones of the 2C that on the outside look very much like this, possibly because they were based on leaked photographs or something of the 2C. But then you look, there's some decent pictures of the logic board, and it definitely, the all Apple branded chips in there. And the other thing I thought is it might be a modern 2C board just put into one of these South American clones, because otherwise the only other tell is the prototype Apple sticker on the bottom, but you could bang that out in Illustrator. So. But yeah, the 2C board does look like the prototype board. It's got the codename markings on it. What do they call it? The later one was codenamed Teddy. This one is Terry or something?
Terry, yes.
Yeah, so it's got the code name on there, and it's got the 83 date code on there, which is very early for the 2C. So that certainly suggests the prototype. So it seems legit, and if so, someone got an unbelievable deal.
Sean, was that you?
Yeah, I hope it was Sean. Deserves to go to a good home. Okay, well, let's see. We had Charles Mangan in our roundtable for the end of the year last month, and he's back in our eBay section here. What's he up to here, Mike?
Yeah, so we know that in addition to the retro connectors that he makes and sells, he also makes miniature Apple II cases, the 2GS and the 2E, and he even made the Apple III. Yay, Apple III. And it looks like he had a few of these autographed by Woz, and he sold them on eBay for charity. And I think the auctions are all over now, or maybe not. It looks like, no, there's one of them that by the time we get this posted, it will be over. But if you want to contribute to one of Charles's charities, I think it's probably a great cause. And the last one sold for around $255. This current one looks like it's at about $175. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, we'll have the links in the show notes. It looks like these benefit the UNC cancer hospitals.
That's fantastic. Nice to see the Apple II community doing some good works. So thank you very much for that, Charles.
I think that that wraps up the eBay section.
Yeah, and I think that about wraps up our show as well, unless you have anything else you want to add, Mike?
Yeah, we do have one feedback item from Randy Brandt. Last month he was talking about a computer called the Basis, and we all kind of went, what? What is that? And he wrote in to let us know that it's a computer that when I look at it, I see the word basis. But I guess because it's a German Apple II clone, it's pronounced Basis. So that's what he was talking about. And if you search for the BASIS 108, I think you'll find all the information out about that. So thank you, Randy, for letting us know that you're not crazy and you actually were talking about something that exists.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, that's a nice, tidy little show for January of 2016. I hope everyone's having a happy new year. And thanks, Henry, for being on the show with us. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, until next month, I guess make sure you get out there and spend some time on your Apple II in the new year.
And buy some products from UltimateMicro.com.
Absolutely. It goes to the Starving Henry Foundation. It's my most favorite charity.
Yes, it's a noble cause.
Yes.
All right. See you next month, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback@open-apple.net.
Berlin, Mike, what's going on here? Apple II celebrities, anyway.
Yeah, so this is... you would ask me this, come on. So this is Geek... this is Geeks
It's your
Fest
item.
Yeah, I know.